Oh gosh, there we go. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Strong at Home. I'm Dr. Brenda Murphy, and I'm an educational psychologist at SailAway Learning and Academy. We are so glad that you joined us for this conversation about, so you really want to homeschool? And I can tell you that that was not the top of mind for me when I began to homeschool. In fact, that was the furthest thing from my mind, as it has been, I think, for many of you watching this broadcast today. You were unexpected, you had no desire to ever homeschool, and that was my position as well. I had an older son who went through kindergarten and first grade, and I got ready to take my second son and put him in school, and I found out that he was not going to be material for a traditional classroom because he got kicked out of a mother's morning out when he was 2 years old. And so I had to find something different for him. And today I'm joined in my discussion of so you want to homeschool with the staff at SailAway Learning and Academy. And it's because of that little incident many years ago, girls, that you are here today. Because if my son was not one of those who didn't follow the rules and didn't want to follow the plan of action, if he had just been every teacher's favorite student, then my life would have been very different. Just like a lot of those people in our audience who found themselves homeschooling unexpectedly. So I'd like to welcome again some of the members of our homeschool community here at SailAway. Bethany Martin is our Director of Development. Hi, Bethany. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
And Carol Willborn is our current Director of Homeschool. Welcome, Carol. Thank you so much. And Dawn Cooper is our Director of Marketing and is also involved in our homeschool operations and department as well. So we all come to homeschooling from a different perspective. And in that, Carol had shared on our other broadcast that she knew from years before she had children that she wanted to homeschool and was well prepared. On the other hand, I did not have any idea that I'd want to homeschool. And when my husband mentioned it to me, I thought he was absolutely crazy, and I would hear nothing of it until I came to a crisis point and had to do something different with my child. And so at that point, I started learning a little bit. And my first experience with a homeschool curriculum, because that's what we all want to use, right, is curriculum, was a teacher's guide for a spelling course for first grade, because I thought I would buy it before I even entered first grade. And as I read through that teacher's guide, I broke into a cold sweat because I thought, how on earth can I ever teach all that they're telling me to teach in this and do something else? And at that point, I didn't even think spelling was that important. This was totally something different than I ever anticipated. So as I've gotten into this homeschool arena, has that been your experience, Carol, with some of the approaches you took? And as you're talking to families about coming in to make that decision for homeschooling, what are some of the ways that we would enter into the homeschool community?
Well, I think there are probably not very many people like me who got interested in it long before they even had children. But I will say, even though I might have had a lot of homeschooling information, I'm not sure I was prepared for homeschooling when I actually started doing it. It is a learning process for everybody. I think even the most, quote, prepared person, there's a huge learning curve. And that's something that a lot of people probably find scary. They want to have it in their mind, the set way of doing things before they get started. But I would just want to tell those people, not even the most experienced public school teacher they're always learning. They're always learning what works better and what works for this type of student versus another type of student. So it's always going to be a learning curve, and don't be afraid of that. Your student is learning along with you, so they probably won't even notice that you don't know everything. But there are a lot of people who, a lot of my reason for becoming a homeschooler was, even though I was interested in it, I probably would have leaned more towards a private school setting by the time my children actually came along, but that just was not a possibility for a pastor's family. We could not afford to do that in the area where we were living. And so that really propelled me then to decide to try homeschooling and see how it would go. There may be a lot of families who feel the same way, but that's not their number one choice for what their education for their children would be, but it's a possibility, and it may be the best possibility, and at least worth exploring and giving a try. Then there are some families that is the only choice they have left. I mean, we see a lot of families that come to us now who they don't want to homeschool necessarily, but it's probably the only choice left for their student, because their student has special learning issues or behavioral issues that have just exhausted what's available from the public school, and maybe a private school is definitely not a financial option. So they find themselves, saying, okay, I guess we're going to try homeschooling. And for people like that, don't beat yourself up to say that, I didn't ever want to do this and I am not going to do this. Just realize, okay, this is where we are now. Let's just give it a try and search for support around you from your homeschool umbrella like SailAway. I feel like we give a lot of support to our families in those situations, but also there are community homeschooling groups. There are virtual homeschool support groups. There are co-ops. There are so many support avenues available to families now that haven't been in the past, that, I feel like even if you feel totally unprepared, totally unwilling, but this is the way you need to go, you can still do this, and it can be a successful adventure for you and your family.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people that are trying to make this very difficult decision. They still have their families, their children are in the public school, but are using an online option, which a lot of the school systems are doing. And that is still a struggle for them to have their children at home. And that learning online, we have found, has been very difficult for many children. I think the research coming out of the last few months is that although we really want that to be a viable option, and it is for some families, that would not necessarily be the only homeschool option for people. So if you're trying to decide what to do, there are many avenues, as Carol said, to explore for homeschooling. For example, when I first started homeschooling, all there was available, and I was kind of a second generation or a second wave of homeschooling, there were some of the publishers of academic textbooks and curriculum for schools were beginning to allow homeschoolers to purchase that. And as I said before, looking at that was like doing school at home. It was everything that you would do in a classroom. So it was just taking the same materials and transferring it to a home situation. And I don't know if any of you had that experience, but that was very difficult for us. That was not something that worked well for my family, although one of my children, I think, would have loved it. All they wanted to do was do a workbook, and at the end of filling in the page and they'd get 100 on, I noticed they really hadn't learned anything. So that really kind of helps them to motivate us to think of different ways to actually teach our children, so that homeschool was not just a mirror image of what was happening in a classroom. And I think that that was a very freeing thing for us personally. And I think it becomes a very freeing thing for many families when they embark upon the homeschool model. It's not the only model, but each person will find the structure and the approach that will work for them. So I think that it's important that as we're making that decision, do we want to homeschool? Can we start with something, and then when we decide whether that's working or not, to think about transitioning to something else and getting the help that we need? One of the things that we have done here at SailAway too is we help families learn how to teach. And that's a big part of what we've always wanted to do, was to teach families, to teach homeschool parents how to be the best teacher that they can be. Because in all of our Strong at Home segments, when we were talking to teachers, it invariably gets back to the person who is the child's best teacher is really the parent. And I think that that's a huge thing in making a decision to homeschool.
I agree with that. I will say that I think it's important to know yourself, because and to try to be in tune with your child's personality, because there are definitely people who might feel like they want to do homeschooling, but their personality with their child is a real clasher, and they're constantly finding themselves, in an embrazen battle. And you might need to explore other possibilities if that's an issue. So I think it is important for you to know yourself and to know your children to the best of your ability. None of us can know another person. We can't even know ourselves 100%, but that we would definitely have to take that into consideration. But to try to just turn your homeschool into a replica of a public school or a private school setting, I think is not going. I don't think many people could possibly meet with success if that was the mindset they had going into homeschooling. But to allow yourself to realize your homeschool is going to look different from anybody else's. So even though it's great to talk to other people who homeschool, to try to do it exactly the way the Joneses are doing is probably not going to work for your family, because your family is not the Jones family.
Amen. I'll jump in on that note. I think when I first started homeschooling, the traditional homeschool mom comes to mind. She, grows her own food. She makes everything from scratch. Her house is totally immaculate. Her children are well behaved, and they're all sitting in a row doing their work, their grades ahead, et cetera, et cetera. That was in my mind anyway. That's the homeschool mom that I knew, and I was like, that's not me. I can't do that. I don't. I'm terrible at math. There's all these shortcomings I have, and so it's dangerous to go into homeschooling and start to. It is dangerous. I spoke before in our last session. It's dangerous to try to come in with a mindset of creating a traditional school setting in your home, because that's not really what homeschooling is. It's totally different, or very different. I won't say totally different. There are some things that are the same, but depending on how you do homeschool. But don't compare yourself to other homeschoolers. Glean from them. See yourself in some of their stories. But it reminded me of, when you first get pregnant with your first child, and every mother has their story that they're going to tell you and their advice. And then when you finally have your child, you figure out that, what, I'm their mom, and I understand them more than all the other moms out there, and you may be able to get advice from other moms and support from other moms, but you are still made to be their mother, and you are their mother, and you know best. And I think it's the same in the homeschool area, that you have to, like Carol said, know yourself and know your child, and then begin to shape your homeschool experience and education for your children based on your family.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's absolutely on target, Dawn. And that is so true, because in every homeschool, everyone is different. And at SailAway, we have what we call first principles. And the first principle of teaching and learning, and really this is as far as preparing for homeschool, is to get understanding. No matter what you do, get understanding. And when we start from that perspective, knowing that that is the first principle upon which we're going to build everything else, then we will come fairly quickly to realizing that understanding ourselves and our children is the most important criteria, and that we have the ability, the innate God-given ability, to make those decisions as God has called us to make them. So we are at our time for this session. Thank you all for joining us. We will have some more information coming about So You Want to Homeschool, how you can make that a more informed decision. I'd like to end by saying the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Thank you all for your input, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.